Everybody, let's have Dragon Talk welcome Reuben Bresler. Yay!
Yay! Hi, everybody. It's good to be back.
Yay!
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. It's good to officially meet you.
Yeah.
Sort of, as we were just discussing. This is your third time on Dragon Talk. You are almost at Wolfgang Bauer levels here.
I will take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment.
I'm very pleased to be invited back and have had such a long relationship with D&D and Dragon Talk. And I've been in studio and I've been out of studio and I've been in, all sorts of different conversations and events and things like that. But first time actually meeting you, Shelley. As the universe has sort of two ships passing in the night. We've never been on the same show.
I don't know why the universe has conspired to keep us apart. And as we were saying before recording, it almost conspired again today because I had serious technical difficulties. So I don't know what's going to happen in this interview now that we are finally talking. It could be good or it could be very, very bad.
Only the fate of the dice will tell.
Right.
Who knows? Well, anyway, I have been a fan of yours for a long time. I feel like we have known each other, so I'm happy to get to talk to you finally.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm obviously a fan of everything Dungeons and Dragons and Dragon Talk, and both of you as well. So I'm excited to have a sit down chat.
Not to mention that other little game, Magic the Gathering, I think it's called.
Yes,
I'm not familiar with that.
You have to they make that on a different floor of the building, I think.
That's right.
It's very easy to miss if you just skip the elevator. But yeah, I've been making Magic content for much longer. I started writing Magic articles when I was in college. I was probably 20.
Wow.
So I've been making Magic content for almost 15 years. And then D&D is much more recent in terms of content. Making shows and writing things and things like that.
Yeah.
Did you think when you were a 20-year-old college student writing articles for Magic that there could be a career path in making content and shows based around Magic and D&D?
Yeah. So it's weird. I went to school kind of for performance. I say kind of because I ended up majoring in English, but I had a film minor. I was always doing whatever I could to get into the performance classes. I was constantly surrounded by people who were actors and screenwriters and stuff like that. And I've always played games. I've always been a nerd. I've been playing D&D since I was a tiny baby and playing Magic since I was 12 or 13 or whatever. And so it seemed like an obvious avenue to combine the two things. And one of the early YouTube creators for Magic the Gathering is a guy named Evan Irwin, who I'm now a co-host with on a show called Magic Mics, M-I-C-S.
I love that name, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great, I was very proud of that one. Yeah, and so that's like a Magic the Gathering talk show, essentially. And he created something called The Magic Show. Like, he was the first guy to make YouTube content on Magic. And you could see it blowing up. And I was like, well, I like games. I like performance and making videos, mix it together. And that's sort of how that came about. And a similar story happened with D&D of like, wow, this live stream thing is a thing that's happening. Kind of want to be a part of it. And I watched Stream of Many Eyes from my house in Vegas at the time and was like, I got to be a part of that next year. Like I have to leave now and go be a part of whatever is next year. And yeah, luckily it worked out.
Yeah. So you moved to LA right at that time, right?
Yeah. So Stream of Many Eyes happened 2017-ish.
No, that was 2018.
Or 2018.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was 2018.
Stream of Annihilation was 2017.
Right. So I watched both of those and they were both very inspiring to me of like, I have to go do this thing. And so I just kind of was ready to pack my bags and move to LA because I wanted to do voice acting and do this other stuff too, but I couldn't really do it from where I was. And luckily it all kind of worked out together where I was like, all right, I'm building this show already, this D&D Magic the Gathering universe idea already. I'll just make it when I get to LA and I'll figure it out when I get there. Right. didn't really have a plan ahead of time. Luckily, Greg and company kind of gave me a plan, which was very nice.
Yeah. So yeah, we were just talking about this, how you came up to Seattle for a completely different event and just happened to be like, oh yeah, we can come into the office and look around and hey, I got something to talk to you about.
Yeah. So
total ambush, Greg.
It was kind of an ambush. Yeah. So I had been working on casting this Magic D&D show before any of the products had been released that combined the two. And I had some friends in Magic who had played D&D and was going to, it was going to be a Magic players in a D&D world. So we all sort of had that zeitgeist. And then I was planning on going to GP Seattle anyway, Grand Prix Seattle, and was like, hey, I'm going to be up, in the area during this time. Can we just do my interview that weekend while I'm in the area? And Greg was like, great, we'll do that. And then said, hey, can you come in a couple hours early for just to hang out? And I was like, sure. So I get there and the room has Greg and like 6 other people in it, some of whom I recognize, some of whom I don't, like Blake Rasmussen's in the room, who I'd known for a while. There were Magic people and there were D&D people. And then there were like a couple of like business people who I didn't really recognize. I was like, what? Am I in trouble?
The suits.
Kind of, whatever passes for suits at Wizards.
Right. That would be, I don't know, socks maybe? They were.
Right. Yeah.
Having the silver D&D t-shirt.
Clean cardigans. Yeah. The polos, actually.
Polo, that's it.
So they were like, so tell us your plan. And I was like, here that. And then I told them what I just said to you. And then they were like, cool. How would you like to do that officially for Dungeons and Dragons? We're releasing a book in 6 months called The Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. It coincides with Magic the Gathering going back to Ravnica. Oh, by the way, nobody knows this yet, so please don't tell anybody.
And here you were thinking, I'm just going to go get a tour.
Right.
And maybe
I'm just
score a
happy
free
to
t-shirt.
be there. Exactly. I'm taking pictures of Mitzi in the lobby. I'm just like, man, this is a nice trip. And yeah, and then it wound up like this. So,
yeah, and then that was the genesis of the Broken Pact, right?
yes, that was the genesis and the beginning of the Broken Pact, which was initially the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica show. The first one, really, which was nice. And with Saving Throw show, starring Jordan Pridgeon. At the time, he has since left the show, but Gaurav Galati, Ashlyn Rose, and Riley Silverman. And we have had 4 total seasons of the Broken Pact at this point, 2 of them on Ravnica, 1 in Avernus, and then the most recent season from the comfort of our own homes in Theros, which is, we've had a couple of specials here and there. It was great. It's
been really great, I think, showing the breadth of fandom in the Magic world around the lore and the storytelling within it. I think that was what was so compelling about your pitch and your idea about of doing a D&D show set in the Magic worlds was that there's all this great storytelling that happens in 1 or 2 lines of flavor text on each card and the artwork and things like that. But there's so much wonderful stuff there, some of which James Wyatt brought more to life in the art books. But man, being able to have Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica and the Theros book give those D&D things, having you guys dramatize that, was just a slam dunk.
Yeah, I was really excited to be able to tell a lot of these stories because there is huge, deep lore. Especially, Ravnica is such a ripe opportunity because it's a city plane and it is so different from everything that D&D had done to that point. The gods are essentially irrelevant in Ravnica, and that was a really unique opportunity to sort of explore what a deity-less city is like. Then you go to Theros and it's the exact opposite. It's the photo negative. The gods are literally walking with you. and being able to pull all of those unique inspirations from the different kinds of, I did a lot of noir stuff in the first season of the Broken Pact. I wanted to have a much more Xena-like feel when I did Theros. And, I was hugely inspired by both Mad Max and The Wizard of Oz for Avernus. But also because I have all this Magic the Gathering knowledge in my head, I get to pull out these references and flavor texts and side characters and be like, you know who would fit here is this tertiary character from this story, and this line would fit in this situation. And it was just a really excellent confluence of my interests, being able to combine the two.
Yeah,
that is pretty cool. Go ahead, Shelley.
No, I think I was thinking of a question which you're kind of answering as you're talking, but wondering how it was, because you said you played D&D for a long time before.
Yeah. My parents were in the same D&D group before they started dating. So they played, they played second edition together. And so they would put me to bed at 7, and then they'd go downstairs with their friends and see me peering over the railing around 8:30. And then sometimes they'd let me play the tavern keeper's assistant, but most of the time they'd put me back to bed. But I got bored by the time they started rolling dice, right?
Oh, you just like the story part.
I'm just over it. And so then I get to college, and now I'm back into D&D and back into collaborative storytelling and back into stretching those improv muscles. And then I fall away from it for a bit. And then I'm like, well, I want a hobby now. And I come back to D&D, come back to the performance, come back to the, I'd been a stand-up comedian for a while. I want to do that kind of energy of pinging off of people. And it's always been sort of a thing that I've come back to. It's like comfort food. And yeah.
And so 4 seasons of Broken Pact. You just had the season finale for the last season. How did that go?
I gotta tell you, I think that it is the best job I've done as a DM for a Zoom game. And because Zoom is way different than live. Because I'm kind of helter skelter to begin with. Being able to focus on one thing on my computer is not going to happen most of the time. I need to really hone in. And the episode just wound up perfectly. Like the dice knew how to tell the story, which I love. They always do, and you have to just sort of let the dice take the wheel. But it wound up so fun, and it was a very combat heavy episode, which can get bogged down sometimes when you're doing a streamed game. But the combat was so different. Everyone was doing different things. There were a lot of different interactions happening across the battlefield. Different outside effects were happening. And so being able to keep it new and fresh every round, every turn, it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I like that how you say the dice knew how to tell the story, because you can't control them, but when they work in your favor, that is always a bonus. So you kind of touched on this a little, but obviously we've all had to change how we did things in the last year, being virtual. So what are you finding as either like the challenges, or maybe there's even pros to being virtual versus being around the table together? What are some of those differences?
Sure. I am the oldest man when it comes to technology and adopting it for D&D. I didn't use D&D Beyond for season 1 of the Broken Pact. I used my book and my character sheets and my pencils and papers. Yeah. And it took me a while to get even into the simplest level of, note-taking online, much less using tools like Roll20 to be able to have a battle map. So being foisted into this technological environment that I'm not used to, I'm not good with computers. This is not my area of expertise. Technology frightens and confuses me. But needing to do it is hugely important. And there are some benefits to everyone having essentially a laptop in front of them. Everyone has access to the entirety of the rule books at a touch of a button. They don't have to futz with, a paper book, which can get in the way. Being able to have to see things like line of sight and darkness and having those kind of discussions is great. Another great thing is having hidden guests. If you do something like that, which we didn't end up doing this season, but if you want to have somebody waiting in the wings and spring it on your players, it's a lot easier to click a button on Zoom than have them hide in the closet during the pre-show, getting everybody set up and keeping that secret.
And then you forget that they're there. And
right, exactly.
Like a few weeks.
So awkward.
Or the players just don't go in that direction, right? They don't meet the shopkeep because they don't go to the shop. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits, and for me, I thrive in the live setting. I also have some social issues with my brain where I have a problem in a live setting, much less delayed over Zoom, not seeing the body language, not seeing everything that I need, that I would like to be able to see to be able to run a game well, not just from a good standpoint, but from a standpoint of that people feel like I'm invested, or that people feel like I'm not interrupting them constantly. It's very difficult over Zoom. I also like physical minis, building maps, that kind of stuff is hugely important to me. But the fact that we've had access to Zoom Dungeons and Dragons and Discord and things like that has been a huge boon. I'm in 2 home games right now, one as a DM, one as a player, over Zoom with friends of mine from Vegas that I moved away from. And, some of the people in that game are in Pittsburgh. And, I've been playing with some folks who are in Seattle, or at least outside of Seattle. And it's refreshing to be able to have physical contact without physical contact. Those games have kind of kept me sane. Yeah.
We've been hearing that a lot. I mean, that's such a nice way to stay connected to friends and family we heard it before the pandemic when the rise of video conferencing became kind of more all-consuming all around the world, where, we lighthearted stories of a parent is able to stay in contact with their daughter by playing, across the Pacific Ocean on a Zoom call and things like that. But now it's all right, that's pretty much standard. You got 2 or 3 games. I've heard from people being like, yeah, I play, D&D, 5 times a week. And you're like, what? And she's like, well, it's my only social interaction. What else am I going to do?
My DM for my Tomb of Annihilation game DMs 6 games a week. And I'm like, I'm tired at 1, let alone, 2. How do you have the mental capacity? Because a lot of people also, I think, recharge their batteries with social interaction. Yeah. I kind of get drained by social interaction. And so it does take effort for me to get out there. But by the same token, we're humans, we're social animals. We need to see people. And my Discord chats and my Zoom games have been hugely important to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Greg, you were in a similar place where your home game had to move virtually, but you have managed to somehow still have physical representation virtually.
I've tried.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm successful.
Right.
In that
Bart says you are.
I have a camera. It's not awesome. It's 720p, and it shows an image, but it, like theater of the mind, everyone's asking the question, be like, how far away am I? I'm like, you can see, you're 6 squares away. So I end up doing the counting and doing all of that anyway. So it's really just an affectation of mine at this point.
So I did a show called Tales From Tetheria, which was a YouTube show with Jovenshire, Lasercorn, AtomicMari, and Noah Grossman.
Nice, Smosh Games crew.
Yeah, it was the old school Smosh Games crew. And I had a physical map set up on my table and a second camera to be able to have 3D maps, be able to use my Jenga blocks to build, buildings, have actual minis and practical effects that I had a ton of fun with, and to have 3D environmental stuff. Because it's really tough. You have a flat screen. It's tough to gauge. And so if you have a physical map, even if it's just in a small box in your Zoom window, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the leveling up of video conferencing where people, it'll be a big enough resolution so it won't feel, you're just looking at a pixelated image of a very small mini, but then being able to zoom and have not necessarily the host be the one who's in charge of that, but having each player be able to change and see their view the way they want to, like you had at the table, right? That's the one great thing, is that if everybody's around the table, you can look and bend and see what you need to see from whatever angle you want. And that's the only part that's really missing for me at this point. But you have the minis, so part of me is I want to be able to show them off as much as I can.
These are my accessories. I want to show off my cool new duds, keep up with the Joneses, show them my new mini kind of deal. And you can't do that really anywhere else other than on the table. When you
Yeah.
when you unveil that sweet mini, right? As a DM, you're just like, you make this thing, you spend your time painting or crafting it, and then you're like, oh man, this is gonna be a good time when I get to reveal it. And you like hide it in a black napkin, right? You ever done this?
Yes.
Where you're just like, all right, you walk into the room and the lights are low and you hear like a growl, and suddenly you see and you unveil whatever it is you just made, and your players go, oh my God, that's amazing. That feeling isn't there. And I'm looking forward to it coming back.
Yes.
For sure.
I have one of my favorite minis memories is in my very first D&D campaign, I was playing an elf sorceress and she could cast mirror image. And because we're wizards and we have lots of minis around the office, the dungeon master actually found like 8 minis of my character, the same one I was playing. So when I cast mirror image, I could like put her in formation. Like all of her little minis. And yeah, so I could even like hide the real Astrid in that pile. So if I were hit by a monster, I could tell the dungeon master that actually didn't hit me. That hit one of her images. It's still one of my favorites.
During the Avernus season, we had a couple of car chases effectively, and we got to use, Hot Wheels cars effectively, like through a canyon, awesome. Right? To sort of measure distance. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
It really does make the argument that D&D is just play, like, right? Like, because you're using Matchbox, you're using the little toys, and it just harkens back to, how Gary Gygax, when he was writing Monsters from the Monster Manual, was really just taking like, oh, here's a toy I found that I've been using at the miniature. It's an owlbear, there it is. And I'm like, that is such a D&D thing to be able to use Matchbox cars.
I think my best minis story is that we did a Christmas special for after the first season of the Broken Pact called "Is It Christmas Yet?" Spelled "Is It" like the guild, and they had to go on an adventure to essentially save Christmas. And before the game started, I said, "There is a rule: you eat what you kill." And all of the players looked at me and they were like, "That's kind of gruesome." And then the first combat happens, and it's a bunch of evil snowmen that I represented with marshmallows.
Oh!
And I said, "Remember, you eat what you kill." And they're like,
oh, I get it.
Yeah. And then like the big bad ended up being like a chocolate muffin thing that I found. And they were like, I don't think I want to be the killing blow. That's way too much food.
No, I would be all over it. That is very motivating for me. Like I would be like, let's fight a wheel of brie. Let's go.
The maps that I made for that special were in gift box lids. And I made them out of frosting. And so I made a snow frosting expanse.
Oh my God.
With cookie pine trees that I covered with the box. And I said, and as you're walking through the woods, let's see what you get. And I placed the present in the middle of the table.
Oh, that's so great.
Cool.
Yeah, that was fun.
Now at the next D&D session we have, that's something like that. We'll be like, all right, here comes a porterhouse steak. It's going to attack you. You got to eat it all when you kill it.
Welcome to Meat Mountain.
Coming to get you.
Here's that entire celery stalk. It's a tree ant. You got to kill it and then eat the entire thing.
That I would do. Smothered in brie.
Crunch it down.
Smothered in brie.
I'm really feeling the brie right now.
It's an ooze.
Are we going to be weird again when we can play D&D together in person? Like, what's that going to be like?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is it's going to take a minute so I'm type 1 diabetic. I went outside like a total of 25 times during this whole thing.
Wow.
Most of which was to my aunt and uncle's house across town. I didn't go to a grocery store. I didn't do any of that stuff. I'm now fully vaccinated in my sort of cool down period. And I went to Costco yesterday.
Whoa.
And I was like,
what was that like? Yeah.
It was a lot. I mean,
jumped right in.
I don't like being outside with strangers to begin with. And it was a lot of, input and noise, and getting used to that again will be tough. Like I'd love to go to Galaxy's Edge. I'd love to. I'm not ready to go to Galaxy's Edge mentally right now. Yeah. I'd love to go back to my LARP. I'm not mentally ready to be in that environment again. The most I've seen, the most people I've seen in one room at the same time is when all four of my roommates are in the or all three of my roommates and I are in the kitchen together.
Yeah.
It's going to take a minute, and we'll get there. And D&D is a safe space and a comfort zone for a lot of people. And so being able to get back into the groove of socializing with that safe space is a great first step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about conventions and events like that, and seeing pictures of it even just kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies at this point. Or even just watching movies or film that are like, oh, why are there so many people? They're hugging. They can't be touching like that.
I know.
They're
And
waiting in
triggering.
line at the bank. Are they crazy?
So close together like that?
Yeah, I can't.
Where's
I think
the
about
X's on the floor?
like I love Gen Con. I think about Gen Con and I go, I mean, that's a lot. I tolerate Comic-Con, and thinking about that main central area where the guys with the loudspeakers are, that's not a thing I'm going to, it makes me uncomfortable thinking about it. Yeah. So it's going to take a while, even for people who are not, social hikikomoris like I am.
Wait, what's that term?
Hikikomori. These are the Japanese people who don't, this is a Japanese term. It's the Japanese elderly who don't leave their homes for like 10, 15, 20 years at a time.
Interesting. I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's a social thing in Japanese culture. Anyway, so even for people who are extroverts, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. Much less people like me who, like, this is my element. Like, I like not seeing people. So.
That's what my wife has been saying. Where in the doldrums of it this winter, she's like, I can't take it anymore. I'm like, it's cool. I get to play my games and have some time alone. And if I need social interaction, I've got Shelly to talk to. I've got my games to run, and that's all I really need, because I have a similar brain makeup to you, where I can be extroverted when needed to be, but my default is, but you know what, I need to shut down and not talk to anyone. So I've been okay with it as well, and it's going to be a real leap of faith to get back into a more normal lifestyle like that. But things will happen. It will occur, and if we're getting excited about things to come, one thing that I am is this Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set that's coming for Magic. That might be the thing that
get
gets
us
me
out
to
of
go
our
into
houses,
stores.
right?
I know, right?
Yes.
I mean, it comes out in what, July? It's close. It's close to having pre-releases. We'll see. I know that the Wizards Play Network announced that I think Africa and Japan are going to have events in stores starting in May. We aren't there, but it's close. And if we get to do Forgotten Realms stuff,
I know, it's crazy.
with people, oh man. Yeah, I mean, we've had Theros and Ravnica coming from Magic into D&D. And, now they're like, okay, we're allowed to cross the streams a little bit now. Because there was a while there, and by a while there, I mean like 20 years, where it was like,
decades.
thou shalt not touch, thou shalt not cross over IPs, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And
why
now-
was that, Shelly? You might be the only one who knows the answer to that.
I don't know the answer. I just very remember that we just didn't. We just didn't do that. I think maybe there was a belief that the fan bases were different, but they're not. There's actually quite a bit of crossover, or I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah,
It was a big deal when we started doing it, though.
I mean, a lot of things used to be a big deal. Like, there was a point in time when Wizards were like, we're not putting a Magic Grand Prix in Las Vegas because it's Las Vegas. And then they started doing it, and they were like, well, I guess we're doing this every year now because it's the biggest thing ever. So you reach these signposts, and then they go, oh, this works. And now Magic is making like a Lord of the Rings thing and a Warhammer 40K thing. And finally, we're getting, instead of Magic going into a D&D book, we're getting D&D going into a Magic set in a standard legal expansion, which means that all of the people that play the most popular format of the game are going to start seeing things like beholders, which don't
Mind
exist
flayers.
in Magic the Gathering. Yeah, mind flayers.
Mhm.
There may be
Gelatinous
named.
cube.
Oh my God, a gelatinous cube card is insane. Like, these are things that don't exist in the Magic multiverse in any conceivable way yet. And it's going to be really exciting to see what they combine. I mean, we do have Bag of Holding, which I will say I officially previewed. A little bit of, but yeah, there's the combination will be even bigger, and I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I like how the mechanics in Zendikar kind of had the rogue and the cleric and the kind of like the party mechanics.
Yeah.
And I think that was really just paving the way for how you can make awesome things happen in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms.
Absolutely, yeah. Zendikar is like this adventure plane.
Anyway, right.
And you want to have those kind of, big Indiana Jones adventures when you're on the adventure plane. And one way you can do that, especially if you're Wizards of the Coast, is to tap into the Dungeons and Dragons aesthetic, which they certainly did when they went back to Zendikar the most recent time. I love that stuff. I think it's great. And it only makes sense to, if you have two huge, like billion-dollar IPs, why not have a little bit of chocolate with your peanut butter? Why not combine the two in new and interesting ways? See what works and see what doesn't. You're allowed to have mistakes happen. It seems difficult for this one to be anything but a huge success. But certainly I think that the Magic expansions going to D&D, the Theros stuff and the Ravnica stuff have been nothing but hits.
Yeah. And I love the idea that it's expanding the multiverse, right? I mean, there's already that idea in Magic that you go to different planes and you get to see different societies and how they grow up. And D&D's had a similar idea throughout its entire history with the idea of Greyhawk and Dragonlance and Dark Sun having these different things, but never really kind of codified into being one multiverse until Fifth kind of has played with that a little bit more. And so I just love the idea that, like, all right, well, the plane of Athos for Dark Sun is just a plane that the planeswalkers haven't gone to yet,
right.
or maybe they have. Maybe that's why it's as messed up as it is. And I love that kind of, as you put it, the chocolate peanut butter mix of how these ideas that are not that different,
right,
can be in the same multiverse.
Yeah, the metaphysics are not that difficult to handwave or explain fully if you really want to be like, well, this is how they're connected. Or you can just say, a wizard did it, and say, you planeswalk to Theros, and then Theros is like, oh, I didn't know there was this other world, because of course they wouldn't, right? So it's very easy to put it together, and it only makes sense because the Magic, one of the good things, is that the Magic worlds are unique in and of themselves, but they're also unique even to D&D worlds. Where you don't have a plane made of metal like you do with Mirrodin. You don't have a plane that is sort of Greco-Roman inspired, really, like Theros. Ravnica has similarities in some ways to Eberron, but it's very vastly different. There are so many myriad examples of other planes that can work in a Dungeons and Dragons sense that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. Was Elminster a planeswalker?
Sure. Sounds great. Like he's probably one of the old planeswalkers before the mending happened, where, the planeswalkers kind of got powered down like 15 years ago in our time, when the events of the time spiral happened. And, before that, they were basically gods. They were so powerful and so unique and so ridiculous that they essentially were all Elminster. So.
Yeah. And there's precedent, too, with Elminster being able to travel to our plane in those old dragon articles where they would hang out in Ed Greenwood's kitchen.
Right.
Mordenkainen and Elminster and Ed Greenwood would hang out and talk.
Yeah.
And then you just put Jace Beleren in that mix, and it's
He'd fit
that
right
easy.
in there.
Yeah, he fits perfectly.
Throw Dritz in there, too. I just feel
sure.
like.
Well,
Really,
you need somebody
sit
to
quietly in the corner.
You need somebody to defend the squishies, right? So I, the wizard, will open the portal. You come along as my bodyguard and brood over there.
There you go.
That's one good
Works
thing
out
that Trist is good at. Yeah, he's official brooder.
Yep. Every party needs one.
That's right.
You mentioned LARPing. That is something that you do. Let's talk about.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the LARPing.
So I picked up LARPing, which is live action role playing, when I moved to LA. A lot of my actor and writer friends had recommended it to me. I'm friends with Ryan Omega, who is the dungeon master for Arcana High, and among other shows. He does live action roleplay these days, all the great stuff that he's making over there. Knox from Scabby Rooster, who runs Total Party Kills and a bunch of other things over on their channel, among others, were like, you would really enjoy this. And I was like, that's like, I'm a nerd, but LARP is a bridge too far, right? Like, that was the reaction in my brain. And I feel like everybody kind of has that initial reaction of, yeah, I do nerdy stuff. I play World of Warcraft or I play Magic the Gathering, but at least I'm not a LARPer, right? Like there's some, I don't know where that comes from, but let me tell you, LARPing might be the least nerdy hobby that I have. It is
Really?
Work. It is exercise. It's the most exercise I get, by a wide margin, because you're hitting people with sticks, soft sticks, but sticks nonetheless. Yeah. And you're running and you're jumping and you're hiding and you're carrying your costuming on your back. So if you're an armored person in Southern California, that's a workout.
You're sweating bullets there.
Yeah,
yep.
As opposed to playing Magic or playing D&D, where, you know, I'm exercising my mind, but I'm not really exercising my body that much. And so that's one of the real big benefits of LARP. And the other thing is, D&D is awesome. And you get to be someone else for 4 hours every week or something like that. I get to be someone else for 40 hours every 6 weeks in a whole nother world, kind of like D&D. But very different also, because you get into these quiet moments that you kind of skip past when you're in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. You say, all right, take your watch, roll your die, and then 8 hours go past. It doesn't happen. You are watching. You are there for 8 hours and having those quiet conversations and keeping your eyes on the darkness and, you know, meeting the NPCs and having to travel there. There's no fast travel. You are walking with your feet. And it's a vastly different experience. And the closest I felt like I've been to quote unquote LARPing in a role-playing sense was either at the Avernus reveal, when, you know, everyone was on the soundstage and there was, you know, the actual war machines were there.
Yeah.
Or the essentially what was called the LARP episode, but it was the live action episode of KOllOK at Hyper RPG.
Yes.
Where there were 40 of us all playing characters, but only one person at a time was really talking. We all had stats, but we rolled like 5 dice through the whole episode. And so it's a vastly different pace and different style of role playing. And it's been just an absolute ton of fun.
It sounds more, I've never been able to do it. I've never found the time. I enjoy the thought of it though, because it's such a mixture of improv theater and you know, the costuming and even the lighting and the presentation, you know, can use all those skills, and I love that transformation that can happen on stage like that. But then you also have this kind of epic adventuring feel, right? So you can actually immerse yourself in being, you know, the kind of characters that you used to pretend when you were a kid, right? Like, I'm going to be Aragorn running through the forest. You know, I was the kid who had the stick, and I'd be whacking it against
and you can
laurel
do
bushes,
that.
and it's like, oh, that orc is really getting it, you know, from me. And it sounds like it's just so much more of that, where you have that full body imagining that, you know, is very childlike, but to be able to do that as an adult with other adults who take it as, I don't want to say seriously, but, you know, as committed to it as you are, it's probably the closest thing that we have to transforming and being in that world.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you enjoy the sort of lighthearted role play that is Ren Fair, if you enjoy the in-depth, serious conversations that you have in certain games of role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons, and you have literally any other interest in social interaction, be it cosplay, creating costumes, be it exercise and becoming a stage fighter effectively, all different manner of people come to live action role play events. And particularly in Southern California, where I live, it's actors and writers and people who are inherently creative, and many of whom are in the movie industry, coming together to create what is really the most immersive role play experience I've ever been a part of.
So how does it work from like a story perspective? Is there like, there's not like a dungeon master, but is there like a story that you're all feeding into, and do the NPCs kind of perpetrate the story? Like, I don't understand that part.
So the way it works for us is I go to a LARP called Twin Mask in Southern California. And there's about, I'm going to guess 400 people.
400 people.
Yeah. I mean, there was a huge boom in popularity. If you've heard of Twin Mask before, it's possibly because there was a segment on The World According to Jeff Goldblum, where Jeff Goldblum showed up and recorded an episode in the games episode. That was a weird day.
It's getting weirder for Jeff Goldblum. It's popping up everywhere.
Let me tell you. Yeah. Yeah. If you want weird, you can do worse than Jeff Goldblum. Anyway, so at any one time, there are probably 100 player characters, 150 player characters walking around the game space, which is like an acre or two of, like 3/4 of a mile or area. And then the rest of the people are NPCs. And they're wearing NPC costumes, or they're just wearing what's, a white headband signifying that they're out of character. And then there's also storytellers. And instead of DMs, there are storytellers. And the storytellers are wranglers, essentially, saying like, all right, you're a zombie, go be a zombie. You're a politician, go do this, right? And they're sort of organizing things behind the scenes, making sure that all the mechanical things work. There's probably about 15 storytellers. Then there's a bunch of logistics people, 15 or 20. And they're also all players, right? They come off of their shift as a storyteller, and then they go back into the game as their character. And it's sort of all this collaborative storytelling working together like that. And so it is a science kind of to get everything scheduled correctly. I could never do it. The folks who founded this particular LARP are old school East Coast LARPers, and then this one has been around for 10 years or whatever. So they know what they're doing, but it is real complicated. You think getting 5 people at the table together is bad? Boy, howdy. Let me tell you what it's like trying to wrangle 400 people at a state campground or whatever.
Yeah. And Ryan Omega did a lot of great work for us around the Icewind Dale, the DnDLive last year. Tried to do that, that kind of thing on Zoom, and to varying degrees of success. But he is, I love the work that he does, and he does it so well, wrangling all those people.
Ryan, so I have a very unique experience with Ryan Omega. He and I play cousins in this LARP, so we're directly related.
Oh, cool.
He's also one of the first people I contacted when I moved to LA, because I knew that this was a person that I wanted to be attached to. He's such a powerhouse. He is endlessly creative, endlessly compassionate, and just brilliant at creating these role play scenarios and getting the best out of performers without necessarily taking over the story. And it's such a unique skill set.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. It's akin to, being a film director or something like that, where you have to have so many different departments and so many different, things going in your head, way more than just a dungeon master, as you said, with 4 or 5 people at the table. Yeah. So cool.
The other thing I will say about LARP is that as a player character, you're kind of also your own DM. Like, there's no one adjudicating what you can and cannot do. There's a level of trust of like, if you get hit 5 times and don't go down, that's kind of akin to cheating almost, but it's on you to know how much of whatever skills you have left, right? And there's not always going to be a storyteller. You have to go create your own story and instigate your own role play and be a part of the world as much as you want the world to revolve around you. That's one of the big mistakes that like me even, you come into LARP expecting the D&D experience, you're going to have a bad time, because as the D&D party, you're the main character, and one person is tailoring an entire world to you. That doesn't happen in a much more open world. The world exists and you're in it, and you can make your own story, and you can maybe become some sort of main character, whatever that means in the context of your event. But you're going to be done with the event at the end of the weekend and say like, man, I had such an epic journey on XYZ. And someone else would be like, I didn't even know that happened.
Oh, wow.
That is neat. That is neat. But I like that as a training ground for D&D players too, because I think a lot of folks who, sometimes play in D&D sessions kind of show up and just be like, all right, the Dungeon Master is going to entertain me, and I don't have to engage or bring any of my own character's wants and needs and desires to the table, when that's what the Dungeon Master needs. Like, they need your engagement in order to make it the most fun for you. And so if the relationship is always one direction, where it's always the Dungeon Master who's being creative and it's not the players, that can get taxing and may not even result in a very good game for anybody at the table. Yeah. But so I think, D&D players out there who are listening to this, think about LARPing. Think about that idea that how you have to make your own stories in collaboration with everyone around you. Like, you don't want to take away and center yourself all the time, but there is something really powerful about having your own story that you want to tell and making decisions that impact, and everybody has to make decisions off of that, right? Yeah. And if you're just passive all the time, being like, entertain me, you're not going to get that immersion.
I mean, a lot of people ask me, what's the best way to become a better Dungeon Master? What's the best way to become better at D&D? And one of the biggest suggestions is try games that aren't D&D, honestly. Like, I love D&D. It doesn't do everything the best, and it doesn't do everything, period. And so trying other, not just role-playing games, trying other board games, trying other LARP is another thing that, you need to expand your horizons at least a little bit beyond the player's handbook. Which, is a great resource and is most of what you need, but you're going to have a real specific experience if you only have that one, touchstone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's true. I mean, read different stories, watch as many different, fantastical or sci-fi stories, and then you'll be even that much more inspired too. Like, be a sponge is what we're trying to say.
Good advice to be better at anything, really.
Yeah.
Right?
Expand your horizons and let other people get rid of your roadblocks, right? Like, if you go into a D&D game and you're like, I'm, the cleric is the healer, right? Like, this is a common trope, is the cleric is going to be the healer. Mm-hmm. That's not really how the cleric class works. The cleric, it can be a very good healer, but a cleric is not necessarily the healing class. If you look at it just from a rule book perspective, they're the best healing class, but the cleric can be a damage dealer. The cleric can be a tank. The cleric can do basically be a druid, honestly, right? There's a bunch of stuff. You could have an entire party of clerics and have no healers. And I think that a lot of people get locked into what their mind sees as, this is the experience I want as Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. This is what Dungeons and Dragons is and what it can be. And then those horizons don't expand anymore. And expanding those horizons is super key, especially if you want to do it as a performance, especially if you want to do a streamed game. You need to be able to constantly be pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And it's a great vehicle for exploring yourself. It's an amazing vehicle for getting through your own psyche and getting your own psychological mind, getting out of your own mind. But you need to be open to the possibility that what your preconceived notions are don't need to happen. Getting rid of your own sacred cows.
Yeah. I love all that. That's good. That's good advice for players and dungeon masters, right? Because there can be those dungeon masters that lock into, this is the story I'm going to tell, and without realizing, like, no, there's a lot that's going to happen when the 4 or 5 players interact with your ideas.
And that was me, honestly. The first couple seasons, I was way more of a railroad DM, which is fine for a stream show, because you kind of need to be a little bit of a teleplay performance.
Yeah.
But I realized I was way too hard in that direction and have since, essentially done way less prep and become way more zen with like, all right, here's the general idea.
That's what I keep telling Shelly is like, the zero prep DM is so much fun because you don't know what you're going to do.
I don't know that that's what like a new dungeon master could really do.
For sure. Correct.
That's true.
You sort of have like a Neo moment when you're a dungeon master where you over prepare, and then one day you're just like, I'm just not going to do it. Right. Yeah. And then suddenly you release and become wind. and then
I've definitely released and became wind.
Right?
Not necessarily.
And it's so freeing to be like, wow, I didn't plan this scene. I didn't plan this NPC. I didn't plan this description. I didn't plan this combat. And it takes a lot of the preparation that goes into that is just knowing what rule stats are, how, doing quick arithmetic on dice, knowing what, the basic rule set is, and then using that to paint a picture.
Yeah. All the things I'm not great at.
Well, it comes with time. It comes with practice.
But I like that going into it with like that Zen feeling, like that's when you have the best stories, right? Mm-hmm. Because everybody picks up on that. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And when you don't know what's going to happen and you're not trying to make something happen.
Yeah.
The players just have that freedom.
My campaign notes these days are like, if you looked at one of my campaign notes from the first season, I had like 5 pages of just like way too much. And now me and my writing partner, Phil DeLuca, we sit down for an hour on Zoom and just like chat most of the time about magic. But then like occasionally we'll come back to the doc and I'll write like my 3-paragraph intro recap of what happened last week. And then there'll be like 3 bullet points. Yeah. Like here's what we have this week. And then I'll just be like, all right, players, what are we doing? Right. And it really helps to have a talented cast. Obviously, you need to have that interplay. And so having folks like Jordan and Danielle, who joined this season, Danielle Radford, having really talented players super helps as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So you are often guesting on other shows. You've popped up on many different.
I'd love to be on more, but
he's available. Everyone,
I'm available. Whenever someone invites me, I try to make the time.
So, question about that: like, what's the prep involved in like dropping into a game? Like, if you're sometimes it's just like, oh, you're just going to be in one episode, or if you don't really know the cast that well, or you don't really have time to like build a lot of your character backstory and background. Like, how do you do that? How do you just drop into these games like that?
Yeah, it's tough, honestly. Yeah. Guesting on especially on a streamed show, where you don't want to pull focus. You want to be a member of the D&D party. It's not like you're a guest star on Seinfeld or whatever, where right. you can just ham it up the whole time and it's a show, so who cares? In a collaborative storytelling effort, you want to be able to share the scene while not being a 2-dimensional bland character. It's very difficult to be able to pull off. And I'm not sure I've done it really that successfully, but having very unique touchstones and styling can help with that. I played a character named Jasper J. Bilgewater on Pirates of Salt Bay, who was a artificer artillerist. And he was a ton of fun to play. And he had a very unique voice. He had a very unique manner of dealing with people. And he had some interesting choices by the end of his episode. And so I think that, having 2 or 3 adjectives and sticking with those key descriptors to be able to guide your moral compass, and having a changing your body or face or voice in some way to be able to touch into a different kind of character than you usually are. Those are 2 great ways to be able to do it. Something I did to try to help my guests this season, we had Gabe Hicks on one episode and we had Gil Ramirez on one episode. And in addition to having them build player characters, I had them play gods of Theros. Because as the DM, I wanted to just be hands off, right? And so I was just like, all right, Gabe, you're the god of storms. All right, Gil, you're the god of the forge, right? Like I just handed them the keys and I sat back and watched. And when somebody asked for a dice roll, I would adjudicate the dice roll. But I did very little DMing in those moments. And because you can just prepare and then release and become wind. But it helps them too, because there's so much written about Perforos. There's so much written about Keranos that I'm like, all right, you want to play a god? I mean, how many experiences are you going to get to play a god, right?
Yeah.
Here's 10 pages on Keranos. You'll probably use none of it, but here it is, right? And then I'll give them a paragraph description of how Keranos would treat the player's quest that they were on. And then I'd answer follow-up questions and just, let them out off the nest.
Oh.
I love that Gil has become, not only is he a blacksmith by trade, he's become, I can role play your blacksmith.
He's
like
the god of
he
the
did that
forge, yeah.
in Stream of Many Eyes. He did it at the Descent. He was Bel, the devil who is crafting so many of the war machines, and Perforos. Like, how great is that?
He LARPs too. He's one of my buddies in character too.
That's why we got him on board for the Stream of Many Eyes, because it was like, oh yeah, you can use your LARP skills and your blacksmithing skills together.
Yeah, the talent of the D&D performance community is constantly mind blowing, and it's
especially in Southern California. I feel like there's that like
crazy.
Just
The hotbed.
meteor of people who are excited to do whatever you throw at them, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And then every once in a while, one of them will be like, oh, by the way, I'm also in this TV show, right? Or I also wrote this pilot, right?
By the way, I'm Jeff Goldblum. And
Right,
like, oh
exactly.
shit, right, you are. I thought you were just an elven sorcerer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, it's been so great getting to chat again with you, Reuben. I'm glad that Shelley, you and Shelley
Finally.
This is
got to
great.
meet.
Yep.
I'm so happy to get
Worth
to
the
chat
wait.
again. Well, I appreciate that. I try to be as charismatic as I possibly can be.
Well, it worked.
It worked.
You got an 18 at least, maybe 17.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll take it. My con is super low, so I need something to up that dump stat.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, we're excited about, as you said, Adventures of the Forgotten Realms. I'm sure there'll be a lot of content coming from you around that, since you're got your toe in both of those worlds for sure. And I don't think we got anything new coming for Broken Pact officially yet.
Not
but
officially,
there might be
no.
something.
Well, we just ended the season 4 in Theros, but we've set up future story. So keep your eyes peeled, and maybe something will come along.
Nice. Maybe around a certain school, perhaps.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah. Of course, I'm talking about Eton. No, I don't know. I was trying to think of a weird school.
Yeah, the real world school that Elminster visited. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I have not considered doing a D&D Strixhaven crossover, but I may have to look into that. That's interesting.
It could be cool.
Let us know what you discover.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on, and looking forward to finally getting to see you in person again one of these days.
Yeah, I'll have to make a trip up to Seattle again. It's been too long to see all my friends up there.
We'll bring you into a room and ambush you. No, damn it. You're right. We won't do that. That's
Okay.
Yeah,
we might do that.
I'm more vigilant this time. I'm not sure I can be as surprised, but we'll see. I would love to be. We'll put it that way.
Wizards ambushed me too when I interviewed. I
Really?
was totally caught off guard. I guess this is how like normal companies did interviews, but I never really had like a real job properly before Wizards. And when I came in for my interview, I thought it was just going to be like me and this nice guy I talked to on the phone, and there was like 20 people in a room, and I was very scared. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I still don't have a real job, so real job.
You have a cool job.
Freelance life.
You have many cool jobs.
Yes.
Yes.
I get fired for a living, is what I like to say.
That's the theater performer right there. You're like, hey, I got a job for 2 months. Just got fired. Going again.
Yep.
Well, here's to many more hirings before as many firings.
I look forward to getting fired as often as possible.
And hired twice.
And then hired later so that I can get fired again. Yeah.
And then take 8 points of damage.
Oh,
Okay. Well, I'll
Greg.
make a note.
Like,
Yeah, we're gonna roll.
Luckily, as a very extremely online person, I have resistance to psychic damage. So,
Man, I want some of that.
all right, got to
Don't
build
read
up
the
that thick
comments.
skin.
Yeah.
that's how we should end every interview, Greg. And let's see, 16 points of damage. Good talking to you.
See you later if you survive.
Good luck.